On the rugged cliffs of Sicily, where the Mediterranean crashed against ancient stone walls and whispers of power echoed through olive groves, stood the Castellini estate. The imposing mansion, with its stone facade and iron gates, cast long shadows over the coastal road below. Lucy Bennett clutched her worn suitcase as the taxi departed, leaving her before the towering gates that protected one of the most feared men in Italy. The wind carried the scent of salt and jasmine as she pressed the intercom, her heart hammering against her ribs. Salvatore Castellini's reputation preceded him, a man who controlled half of Sicily's underworld, yet couldn't control the fate that had befallen his only son. The stories of his ruthlessness were legendary, but whispers of his grief for his lost wife and blind child had reached even Lucy's small village. The gates swung open with an ominous creak, revealing a pathway lined with cypress trees leading to the mansion. Lucy had applied for the position out of desperation, needing both the money and escape from her own painful past as a nursing student who had lost everything. An elderly housekeeper named Mrs. Ricci met her at the massive wooden doors, her face a map of wrinkles and suspicion. "You're the new caretaker for the boy?" she asked, eyeing Lucy's modest clothes and the medical reference books peeking from her bag. The interior of the mansion felt like a museum, priceless art adorning walls, marble floors that echoed every footstep, and furniture that looked untouched for years. The wealth on display made Lucy's modest upbringing seem even more distant as she followed Mrs. Ricci through the cavernous halls. "The master rarely leaves his office except to check on the boy," Mrs. Ricci explained in hushed tones, leading Lucy up a grand staircase. "Dr. Barone comes twice weekly for treatments and examinations. You are not to interfere with his work." They paused outside a heavy oak door, and Mrs. Ricci's voice dropped even lower. "The previous 3 caretakers lasted less than a month. The boy's condition is challenging, and the master expects perfection in his care." Lucy steeled herself as the door swung open to reveal a nursery shrouded in darkness, heavy curtains blocking all natural light. In the center sat an ornate crib, where a small boy, no more than 2 years old, lay motionless beneath a mobile he couldn't see. The room smelled of medication and disinfectant, clinical and cold, despite the expensive toys lining shelves that would never be properly seen or played with. A monitoring system blinked in the corner, recording every sound and movement in the sterile environment. Salvatore Castellini emerged from the shadows beside the crib, his tall frame and sharp features softened only by the gentle way he touched his son's dark curls. His eyes, when they met Lucy's, contained a coldness that made her breath catch in her throat. "This is Antonio," he said, his voice surprisingly soft for a man who commanded fear throughout Sicily. "My son has been blind since shortly after his mother died giving birth to him. A cruel twist of fate that the doctors cannot explain or fix." Mrs. Ricci handed Lucy a thick binder containing the child's medical history, medication schedules, and care instructions. "Memorize this tonight," she instructed, her tone leaving no room for questions or mistakes in the rigid routine. As Lucy approached the crib, something unexpected happened. The boy's head turned slightly toward the sound of her footsteps. His eyes, though unfocused, seemed to track the movement for just a fraction of a second before stillness returned. That night, Lucy pored over Antonio's medical files by lamplight in her small quarters adjacent to the nursery. The diagnosis seemed concrete: congenital blindness exacerbated by neurological complications, requiring regular sedatives to prevent distressing episodes. The morning routine began at precisely 6, with medication administered before the child even fully awoke. Lucy noticed how the small pills dissolved quickly in the warm milk, leaving behind a slightly bitter scent that made her nursing instincts prickle with unease. Dr. Barone arrived precisely at 9, his silver Mercedes purring up the driveway like a predatory cat. He carried an air of authority in his tailored suit and practiced smile, barely acknowledging Lucy as he conducted his examination behind closed doors. Through the slightly ajar door, Lucy observed how the doctor deliberately shined his penlight away from Antonio's eyes, while documenting no light response in his notes. The deliberate misdirection was subtle. A professional might miss it, if they weren't looking specifically for deception. When Salvatore entered to discuss his son's progress, Dr. Barone's demeanor shifted subtly, his shoulders straightening, his voice adopting a carefully measured tone of sympathetic authority. "The treatments are maintaining stability, but I'm afraid improvement remains unlikely." That afternoon, while Antonio napped and the medication levels in his system were lower, Lucy conducted her own quiet observations. She moved silently around the room, rearranging items and noting how the boy's head would occasionally turn toward louder sounds. During the evening bath, Lucy accidentally splashed water near Antonio's face, and his eyelids flickered, a reflexive response that shouldn't exist in someone with complete blindness. Her heart raced as she gently dried his face, mind whirling with possibilities and questions. After ensuring Antonio was asleep, Lucy slipped into the adjacent monitoring room, where feeds from the nursery cameras were displayed on multiple screens. She noticed something odd. Certain times of day were missing from the archived footage, particularly during Dr. Barone's visits. Salvatore found her reviewing the medication list later that evening, his sudden appearance making Lucy jump. "You have questions," he stated, rather than asked, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made the room feel smaller and the air thinner. "I just want to understand his condition better to provide the best care," Lucy replied carefully, aware that her suspicions, if unfounded, could cost her this job she desperately needed. His response to stimuli seems inconsistent with complete blindness. The subtle shift in Salvatore's expression, a flash of something between hope and fury, disappeared as quickly as it had come. "Dr. Barone has been treating my family for 20 years, he said, each word deliberate and weighted with unspoken warning. Through careful exploration of the mansion, Lucy discovered a hidden panel in the library containing surveillance equipment monitoring every room, including the doctor's private consultation area. The technology was sophisticated, belonging to someone paranoid or threatened. When Mrs. Ricci caught Lucy examining the nursery windows one afternoon, the elderly housekeeper hesitated before whispering. The last caretaker asked too many questions about the medications. She disappeared the next day, all her belongings left behind. While searching for clean linens, Lucy discovered a locked cabinet in the housekeeping closet, containing vials identical to Antonio's medication, but labeled differently, with warnings about sedative effects and optical suppression compounds not mentioned in his medical charts. The following morning, Lucy, accidentally, spilled Antonio's medication down the sink, replacing it with simple sugar water. Within hours, the difference was remarkable. The boy's movements became more coordinated, his head turning decisively toward sounds in the room. During his bath that evening, Lucy dimmed the lights rather than keeping them off entirely, noticing how Antonio's pupils contracted slightly in response to the faint illumination. Her nursing training confirmed what her instincts had suspected. This child was not completely blind. When she heard Salvatore's heavy footsteps approaching down the hall, Lucy quickly restored the darkness, her pulse racing with the dangerous knowledge she now carried. She was playing a perilous game in the home of a man known for eliminating problems permanently. "He seems more alert today," Salvatore observed, his voice carrying a note of question as he studied his son's more animated movements. "Is there something different about his care routine that I should know about?" Lucy chose her words carefully, aware that cameras were recording their conversation. "I've been incorporating some gentle sensory stimulation techniques I learned during my nursing studies. They can help development even in children with visual impairments." That night, Lucy slipped into Salvatore's study while he was meeting with associates downstairs, quickly photographing financial documents that revealed monthly payments to Dr. Barone, far exceeding normal medical fees. The transactions were labeled Project Blackout. A hidden compartment in Salvatore's desk contained photographs of a woman who could only be Antonio's mother, alongside documents about a rival family, the Morales organization, whose operations had been systematically dismantled by Salvatore over the past 2 years. As Lucy was replacing the files, a floorboard creaked behind her, and she turned to find Mrs. Ricci watching from the doorway. Instead of raising an alarm, the elderly woman placed a finger to her lips and beckoned Lucy to follow her down a narrow servants' corridor. In a small alcove away from cameras and listening devices, Mrs. Ricci revealed the truth. She had been Antonio's mother's personal maid before her death. Karina suspected someone was poisoning her throughout her pregnancy. She left evidence for Salvatore, but it disappeared. Dr. Barone diagnosed her with paranoid delusions, Mrs. Ricci continued, her weathered hands trembling slightly. After she died in childbirth and the baby was diagnosed as blind, Salvatore was too broken by grief to question the convenient medical explanations. The next morning, Lucy noticed an unmarked car parked down the road from the estate, its occupants clearly conducting surveillance. She casually mentioned unusual traffic to Salvatore, who immediately increased security while studying her with renewed intensity. During Dr. Barone's next visit, Lucy placed a hidden recording device beneath the examination table, capturing the doctor's phone conversation after Salvatore left. The boy continues to respond to the treatment. Yes, keeping Castellini distracted with his son's condition is working perfectly. When she slipped back into the nursery that night to check on Antonio, Lucy found Salvatore standing in the darkness beside his son's crib. "Tell me," he said without turning, his voice deadly quiet, "what you believe is happening to my child." Lucy knew her next words might determine whether she lived or died, but Antonio's future hung in the balance. "I believe your son can see, Mr. Castellini," she said, stepping forward into the dim light, "and I believe someone has been deliberately keeping him in darkness." Salvatore's eyes darkened like storm clouds gathering over the Mediterranean, as Lucy's words hung in the air between them. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Lucy thought she had miscalculated, signed her own death warrant in the house of a man who had killed for less. "Explain," he commanded, his voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the weight of imminent violence if her answer proved unsatisfactory. Lucy reached into her pocket and produced the recording device, playing Dr. Barone's damning conversation. The transformation in Salvatore was instantaneous and terrifying, cold calculation replacing shock, as he processed this betrayal from a man he had trusted with his family's care. "The Morales family," he murmured, connecting threads that had been invisible until now. By morning, the Castellini estate had transformed into a fortress, armed men patrolling the grounds while Salvatore made calls from his study in multiple languages, his tone carrying deadly promise. Lucy was instructed not to leave Antonio's side under any circumstances. "My wife died questioning her sanity because of that man," Salvatore revealed when he joined Lucy in the nursery hours later, his composed exterior barely containing his rage. "While I grieved, they manufactured my son's condition to keep me distracted from their operations." Lucy gradually reduced Antonio's medication under Salvatore's watchful eye, documenting every improvement with photographs and notes that would become evidence. The boy's increasing responsiveness to visual stimuli confirmed what they now knew. His blindness was induced, not congenital. Through careful questioning, Lucy learned that the Morales organization had been systematically infiltrating Salvatore's territory during the 2 years he'd been consumed with his son's care. Dr. Barone, their planted agent, had ensured Salvatore remained too preoccupied to notice. "Why did you suspect?" Salvatore asked Lucy late one night, as they watched Antonio sleeping peacefully for once, his small chest rising and falling without the labored breathing the medications had caused. Others with more medical training never questioned his diagnosis. Lucy hesitated before revealing her own painful history, how her infant son had died from a misdiagnosed condition that any competent doctor should have recognized. "After losing him, I completed my nursing studies to ensure no parent would suffer as I did from medical negligence." The vulnerability in her confession created an unexpected bridge between them. Salvatore reaching across the space between their chairs to take her hand, a gesture both gentle and strong that acknowledged their shared understanding of profound loss and burning injustice. A search of Dr. Barone's estate, conducted quietly by Salvatore's most trusted men, uncovered hidden communications with the Morales family and detailed records of the chemical compounds used to maintain Antonio's artificial condition over the past 2 years. Lucy developed a careful rehabilitation program for Antonio, gradually increasing his exposure to light and visual stimulation while weaning him completely off the harmful medications. Each small victory, his first smile at seeing a colorful toy, his hands reaching for moving objects, felt miraculous. Surveillance identified 3 household staff members who had been reporting to the Morales family, including the gardener who maintained the grounds and had access to the water supply feeding the nursery. The infiltration was more extensive than Salvatore had initially feared. "They thought they could destroy me by attacking my family," Salvatore told Lucy, as they watched Antonio track a butterfly mobile Lucy had hung above his crib. "Instead, they've awakened something they cannot possibly survive." As they prepared for Dr. Barone's next scheduled visit, unaware that his betrayal had been discovered, Lucy caught a glimpse of Salvatore's phone, messages regarding shipment movements, security protocols, and a single line that chilled her. "Confirm cleanup team standing by. Dr. Barone arrived at his usual time, medical bag in hand and practiced smile in place, completely unaware that his patient was now off the suppressive medications. When Antonio visibly tracked his movement across the room, the doctor's facade slipped for just a fraction of a second. "He seems more responsive today," Dr. Barone noted casually, his fingers tightening almost imperceptibly around his pen. as he reached for Antonio's medication chart. "Perhaps we should adjust his dosage to prevent overstimulation." Lucy stood her ground beside the crib, her body language making it clear she would not be leaving the room during this examination. "Actually, he's been showing remarkable improvement since we began the new sensory integration techniques I mentioned last week." Salvatore entered silently, closing the door behind him with deliberate care that made Dr. Barone's head snap up in alarm. "My son appears to be recovering from his blindness, doctor," Salvatore said, his tone conversational despite the deadly intent in his eyes. What followed was a masterclass in controlled interrogation, Salvatore circling the increasingly nervous doctor, presenting evidence piece by piece while Lucy documented every confession, every desperate explanation, every attempt to shift blame to the Morales family. "They approached me 2 years ago, doctor," Barone finally admitted, sweat beading on his forehead as Salvatore's patience visibly thinned. "They knew about financial problems I was hiding, gambling debts that would have destroyed my reputation and practice, and the doctor's confession revealed an elaborate scheme. Carina Castellini had indeed been slowly poisoned during pregnancy, not enough to kill her, but enough to weaken her and create complications during childbirth. Her death had been the unintended consequence of their plan. Antonio was meant to be the perfect distraction, a son with special needs requiring Salvatore's attention and resources, while the Morales family systematically targeted his business operations. The medications had kept the child docile and visually impaired, but otherwise unharmed. Lucy watched as something dangerous and primal surfaced in Salvatore's expression, his hands flexing at his sides in a way that made Dr. Barone shrink back against the wall. "Please," the doctor whimpered. "I have a family, children of my own." "As did I," Salvatore interrupted, his voice terrifyingly soft. "A wife who died questioning her own mind, and a son who has spent 2 years in darkness because of you." Instead of the violent retribution Lucy expected, Salvatore simply opened the door and nodded to his waiting security team. "Take the doctor to the boathouse. Ensure he's comfortable while we verify the details of his story and the extent of his involvement." That night, as a storm rolled in from the sea and lightning illuminated the nursery in brief, brilliant flashes, Lucy found herself drawn to Salvatore as he stood watching the tempest from the window. The shared crusade to save his son had created an undeniable connection between them. "You risked everything to help Antonio," Salvatore said quietly, turning to face her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Vulnerability beneath the strength, gratitude tangled with something deeper and more dangerous than either should acknowledge. Lucy's response died in her throat as gunshots echoed from the direction of the boathouse, followed by the sound of vehicles approaching the main gate at high speed. Salvatore moved with practiced efficiency, locking the nursery door and retrieving a hidden weapon from a panel beside the window. "It seems the doctor managed to alert his employers," he said grimly, checking the ammunition before handing Lucy a small pistol from the same hidden compartment. "Take Antonio to the panic room behind the bookcase in my study. You'll find everything you need there." Lucy raced through the mansion with Antonio clutched tightly to her chest, the sound of gunfire and breaking glass creating a terrifying soundtrack to their flight. The boy, sensing her fear, remained remarkably quiet, his small hands gripping her shirt as they navigated the darkened hallways. The study door was ajar when they reached it, stopping Lucy in her tracks as every instinct screamed of danger. A shadow moved inside the room, too small to be Salvatore, too deliberate to be a frightened staff member seeking shelter from the attack. She backed away silently, changing course toward the kitchen where she knew a service elevator led to the wine cellar, another secure location Salvatore had mentioned during their contingency planning. Antonio's eyes widened at the flashes of light visible through the windows they passed. The kitchen was empty, but showed signs of hasty abandonment, a pot still bubbling on the stove, a knife embedded in a cutting board mid-preparation. Lucy grabbed the knife with her free hand as she punched the elevator call button, hearing footsteps approaching from the dining room. A man appeared in the doorway, not wearing the Morales family's signature navy suits, but tactical gear, with no identifying markers. Professional mercenaries, not family soldiers, which meant this operation was being conducted with deniable assets to protect the Morales name. "The child doesn't need to be harmed," the man said in accented English, holding his weapon steadily trained on them. "Our employer simply requires leverage to ensure Castellini's cooperation in certain business arrangements." The elevator arrived with a soft chime that sounded impossibly loud in the tense standoff, its doors sliding open to reveal Mrs. Ricci holding a shotgun, with the steady hands of someone far more dangerous than her role as housekeeper had suggested. The mercenary fell before he could turn toward the new threat. Karina's family was in protection before she married Salvatore, Mrs. Ricci explained as she ushered Lucy and Antonio into the elevator. I was assigned to watch over her, a duty I failed in life but will not abandon in death. The wine cellar had been converted into a secure bunker with reinforced walls, communication equipment, and enough supplies to last weeks if necessary. Mrs. Ricci sealed the heavy door behind them just as an explosion rocked the mansion above, dust sifting down from the ceiling. Through the security monitors, they watched as Salvatore's men engaged the intruders in a coordinated defense that spoke of long preparation for just such an attack. Salvatore himself moved through his home like an avenging spirit, deadly and efficient in protecting what was his. Antonio, now fully alert in this crisis, stunned them both by pointing at the monitor showing his father and clearly saying "Papa," his first word, emerging in this moment of chaos to confirm what they had suspected. His cognitive development had been suppressed but not destroyed by the medications. The battle for the Castellini estate raged for hours, the tide turning when reinforcements arrived from Salvatore's allies in neighboring territories. By dawn, the remaining attackers had been captured or driven back, leaving behind their dead and a mansion scarred by violence. When Salvatore finally reached the wine cellar, he was bloodied but unbowed, his expression transforming from grim determination to wonder as Antonio reached for him with perfect visual tracking. The boy's second word, "Papa si," brought the fearsome mafia boss to his knees in tearful astonishment. The captured mercenaries revealed under interrogation that Fernando Morales himself had ordered the assault after learning of Dr. Barone's capture, fearing the doctor would reveal the full extent of their operation to undermine Castellini's empire while using his son as emotional leverage. In the aftermath, as workers began repairs on the damaged mansion and security protocols were enhanced, Salvatore made a decision that surprised even his closest associates. Antonio needs specialized care to recover fully, he announced, care that cannot be provided while we remain under threat. Within 24 hours, Salvatore's private jet departed Sicily with Lucy, Antonio, Mrs. Ricci, and a security detail bound for a private medical facility in Switzerland. The exclusive clinic, nestled among snow-capped mountains and pristine lakes, specialized in rehabilitation for neurological conditions. The team of specialists assembled to treat Antonio represented the best in their fields: neurologists, ophthalmologists, and developmental therapists working together to assess the damage from 2 years of chemical suppression. Their initial prognosis was cautiously optimistic, but emphasized the critical window for intervention. The lead ophthalmologist, Dr. Keller, conducted specialized tests revealing Antonio's retinas had suffered minor scarring from the prolonged chemical exposure. She developed a custom treatment protocol involving gentle light therapy and specialized eye exercises to strengthen the damaged tissue. During the first week, Antonio experienced severe headaches as his visual system awakened from its forced dormancy. Lucy stayed by his bedside through these painful episodes, singing Sicilian lullabies she had learned from Mrs. Ricci to comfort him through the worst moments. The clinic's security team, hand-picked veterans from Salvatore's most trusted circle, established an impenetrable perimeter around the medical facility. Their presence, while reassuring, created tension with the Swiss medical staff unaccustomed to armed guards in their peaceful sanctuary. Each evening, Lucy documented Antonio's progress in a leather-bound journal, recording every new word, each color he could identify, and how far across the room he could track moving objects. These meticulous notes became not just medical records, but the chronicle of a miracle unfolding day by day. His visual pathways are intact, the lead neurologist explained during their first consultation, pointing to brain scans displayed on multiple monitors. The compound suppressed function rather than causing permanent damage, but we must act quickly to establish proper neural connections. While Antonio underwent his initial treatments, Salvatore remained in constant communication with his operations in Sicily, orchestrating a methodical dismantling of the Morales organization. Each day brought news of another warehouse seized, another lieutenant arrested, another financial account frozen. Lucy found herself in an unexpected role, not just Antonio's caretaker, but an essential part of his treatment team, her observations and nursing background providing valuable insights that even the specialists hadn't considered. The boy responded to her with a trust that accelerated his progress. "He recognizes colors now," Lucy told Salvatore one evening as they watched Antonio sleeping peacefully in his hospital room. the mountain moonlight casting gentle shadows across his face. The doctors say it's remarkable how quickly his brain is forming new pathways. Salvatore's hand found hers in what had become a familiar gesture between them, his calloused fingers intertwining with her own, in silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. "You gave my son back his sight," he said, his voice rough with emotion rarely displayed. The peaceful interlude at the clinic shattered 1 week into their stay when the head of security burst into Salvatore's temporary office with urgent news. "Fernando Morales has taken control of your northern territories," he reported. "He's demanding your return to negotiate terms." A video call confirmed the intelligence. Fernando Morales, elegant in his tailored suit despite the underlying cruelty in his eyes, smiling from behind Salvatore's own desk in Sicily. "Your son for your empire," he proposed silkily. "A fair exchange between businessmen." Salvatore's response was measured, betraying none of the rage Lucy could see building behind his controlled expression. "You mistake my absence for weakness," he replied, a common error among those who will not live to make another. After ending the call, Salvatore faced an impossible choice: return to Sicily to defend his territories and risk Antonio's recovery, or remain in Switzerland protecting his son while watching his empire crumble. The burden of leadership had never weighed more heavily on his shoulders. "I can continue Antonio's treatment protocols," Lucy offered, as they discussed options late into the night. "The doctors have trained me in the essential therapies, and Mrs. Ricci can help maintain security while you address this threat." The proposal met fierce resistance from Salvatore, who paced the length of their private suite like a caged predator. "Morales knows about you now," he countered, running a hand through his dark hair. "You've become a target by association with my family." A compromise emerged by morning. Salvatore would return to Sicily with half the security detail, while Lucy and Antonio would be moved to a different facility with falsified records and new identities. The separation was necessary but felt like physical pain as they said their goodbyes. "I will find you when it's safe," Salvatore promised, his forehead pressed against Lucy's in a moment of rare vulnerability, before he straightened, once again becoming the feared mafia boss with a reputation for ruthless efficiency. "Keep our son in the light." As Salvatore's jet disappeared into the clouds, Lucy held Antonio close, whispering promises of safety and reunion that she prayed she could keep. The boy watched the sky long after the plane had vanished, as if his newly functioning vision could somehow keep his father in sight. Lucy and Antonio's new sanctuary was a remote chateau in the French countryside, owned by a former associate of Salvatore's late wife. The sprawling estate provided both security and space for Antonio's continuing therapies, away from prying eyes and potential threats. The daily routine they established focused entirely on Antonio's recovery. Mornings devoted to visual stimulation exercises, afternoons to language development, and evenings to physical therapy, to address the muscle weakness from years of induced lethargy. Every day brought measurable progress that Lucy documented meticulously. News from Sicily reached them through secure channels, cryptic updates on Salvatore's calculated offensive against the Morales organization. His strategy was deliberate and devastating, targeting their financial infrastructure rather than engaging in open warfare that might attract law enforcement attention. Antonio spoke more each day, his vocabulary expanding exponentially, as if making up for lost time. "When Papa come?" became his most frequent question, always accompanied by a solemn study of the horizon, as if expecting Salvatore to appear at any moment. The chateau's caretaker, an elderly Frenchman named Girard, who had once been Salvatore's father's driver, taught Antonio to play chess on a hand-carved set in the library. The boy's strategic thinking proved remarkably advanced for his age, suggesting the medications had suppressed but not damaged his cognitive abilities. 2 months into their protective exile, Mrs. Ricci intercepted a delivery man at the gates whose identification didn't match their approved vendor list. The subsequent security sweep discovered sophisticated surveillance equipment hidden in the groceries. Their location had been compromised. Analysis of the surveillance devices revealed cutting-edge technology available only to government agencies or those with extraordinary resources. More disturbing was the discovery of a tracking compound in Antonio's medication, suggesting someone on their medical team had been compromised. The emergency evacuation protocols executed flawlessly under Mrs. Ricci's direction, her years as a covert protection agent evident in the calm efficiency with which she dismantled their lives and erased evidence of their presence. Within hours, the chateau appeared abandoned for months, rather than minutes. During their clandestine journey to Norway, They traveled under diplomatic cover arranged through Salvatore's influence, with Antonio disguised as a diplomat's grandchild, and Lucy posing as a cultural attaché. The boy adapted to his new identity with surprising skill, maintaining perfect silence during border crossings. Their Norwegian safe house had been designed by an architect who specialized in creating environments for children with sensory processing disorders. The acoustics, lighting, and spatial organization were precisely calibrated to support Antonio's developing senses while providing maximum security through innovative camouflage technologies. They executed their emergency relocation plan within hours, abandoning most possessions and traveling by unmarked van to a private airfield, where a chartered plane waited to take them to their third sanctuary in as many months. Antonio, now accustomed to sudden changes, remained calm throughout the journey. Their new safe house was a modernist structure built into a Norwegian hillside, its glass walls offering panoramic views of fjords that captivated Antonio's improving vision. The isolation provided security, but also a growing sense of disconnection from Salvatore and the resolution they awaited. The turning point came during a fierce winter storm that cut power to their remote location, forcing them to gather around the fireplace for warmth and light. Antonio, watching the dancing flames with fascination, suddenly announced with perfect clarity, "Papa is winning." The boy's statement proved prophetic when communication arrived the following morning. Salvatore had orchestrated a masterful trap, using deliberately leaked information about a vulnerable shipment to lure Fernando Morales into personally overseeing an attack that led to his capture. With Fernando in his custody, and evidence of the Morales family's illegal operations delivered anonymously to Interpol, Salvatore had effectively neutralized the threat without implicating his own organization. The chess game had ended with a decisive checkmate. "It's time to come home," Salvatore's message concluded, including coordinates for extraction and reunion. Lucy found herself unexpectedly emotional at the prospect. The months of danger and isolation had transformed their relationship into something neither had anticipated. The journey back to Sicily felt both endless and too brief, Antonio's excitement growing with each mile that brought them closer to reunion. His vision, now almost completely normalized, allowed him to press his face against the helicopter window as they approached the familiar coastline of his birthplace. Salvatore waited on the helipad, standing alone with the Mediterranean wind tousling his hair as the aircraft descended. The moment the doors opened, Antonio broke free from Lucy's grasp, running on legs that had grown stronger through determined therapy directly into his father's arms. The embrace between father and son, one who had emerged from darkness to find light, the other who had walked through fire to protect what he loved, represented everything they had fought for through the long months of separation and danger. Lucy watched from a respectful distance until Salvatore's extended hand invited her into their circle. The Castellini estate had transformed during their absence. The fortress-like security remained, but now concealed a home filled with light. Windows previously shuttered stood open to the Sicilian sunshine, heavy drapes replaced with sheer fabrics that danced in the coastal breeze. Antonio's nursery had been completely redesigned, the clinical sterility replaced with vibrant colors and educational toys that stimulated his developing vision and mind. A mural of the Mediterranean stretched across one wall, bringing the beauty of his island heritage into his daily environment. An adjacent room had been converted into a specialized therapy space with equipment sourced from rehabilitation centers worldwide. The room featured adjustable lighting that could simulate different natural environments, from forest-dappled sunlight to ocean reflections, providing Antonio controlled exposure to visual complexities. Salvatore had commissioned a series of children's books illustrated with Antonio's recovery journey, disguised as adventure tales about a young prince emerging from an enchanted sleep. The stories, written by Lucy based on their experiences, were being discreetly distributed to pediatric centers treating children with similar conditions. The garden underwent transformation under Lucy's guidance, incorporating a sensory pathway with plants selected for their varying textures, scents, and colors. Antonio spent hours exploring this tactile wonderland, often leading visiting children of Salvatore's associates on expeditions through what he proudly called his jungle of discoveries. Local artisans were engaged to create custom educational tools that combined Sicilian cultural elements with developmental exercises. Wooden puzzles featuring landmarks of the island, textured maps of the Mediterranean, and musical instruments modified for small hands became Antonio's treasured possessions as he connected with his heritage through newly awakened senses. Dr. Barone's extensive records, secured during Salvatore's reclamation of his territories, provided crucial evidence for the prosecution of remaining Morales associates. The doctor himself had disappeared during the initial attack on the estate. His fate as subject Salvatore declined to discuss even with Lucy. The legal aftermath unfolded over the following months. Carefully sanitized versions of the conspiracy presented to authorities resulted in arrests throughout the medical establishment that had facilitated Antonio's false diagnosis and treatment. The scandal dominated headlines across Europe without ever mentioning the Castellini name. Antonio thrived in the restored family environment, his development accelerating as if racing to reclaim the years stolen from him. By his third birthday, celebrated with a small gathering of Salvatore's most trusted circle, he showed no lingering effects from his ordeal beyond a profound appreciation for color and light. Lucy's position evolved from caretaker to something undefined, yet essential to both father and son. She maintained her professional focus on Antonio's continuing development, while finding herself increasingly involved in decisions that shaped the household and, by extension, Salvatore's personal life. "You could leave now," Salvatore observed one evening as they watched Antonio chasing fireflies in the garden, his laughter carrying on the warm night air. "Your nursing credentials, enhanced by your work with Antonio's recovery, would open doors at any pediatric facility in Europe." The question beneath his statement hung unspoken between them, a rare uncertainty from a man accustomed to commanding rather than asking. Lucy's answer came not in words, but in the deliberate way she remained beside him, her hand finding his in what had become their private language of commitment. The proposal, when it finally came weeks later, reflected Salvatore's dual nature, the tender father and the powerful Don. "My son needs a mother," he began pragmatically, before vulnerability crept into his expression, "and I find myself unable to imagine a future without you in it." The ring he offered carried historical significance, not his late wife's, which would have haunted their beginning, but his grandmother's emerald that had been given in a love match that defied family expectations and flourished despite the dangers of their world. Their wedding was a quiet affair by Mafia standards, attended only by those who had proven their loyalty during the darkest days of their struggle. Mrs. Ricci, now formally acknowledged as Antonio's godmother, wept openly as Lucy walked toward Salvatore in the estate's private chapel. Antonio, resplendent in his miniature suit and newly appointed role as ring-bearer, watched the ceremony with perfect visual clarity and emotional understanding beyond his years. "We family now," he announced with satisfaction during the reception, his simple declaration earning approving nods from Salvatore's hardened associates. The inevitable questions about Lucy's past and the loss that had initially driven her to the Castellini estate found resolution through Antonio's foundation, an organization established in her first son's memory to provide specialized medical care for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Salvatore's business operations underwent subtle but significant changes in the months following their marriage, legitimate enterprises receiving greater focus and resources, certain territories and activities quietly divested. The transition wasn't complete or perfect, but the trajectory was unmistakable. The night of their first anniversary, as they stood on the cliffside terrace watching the moonlight shimmer across the Mediterranean, Salvatore reflected on their extraordinary journey. "You came to give light to a blind child," he murmured, drawing her close. "But you brought all of us out of darkness." Antonio, now speaking in complete sentences and showing remarkable aptitude for both languages and mathematics, had developed a ritual of watching both sunrise and sunset each day. "I like to see the light change," he explained when asked about his habit. "It reminds me we won." Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching this story from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, because your support is important for me to continue here.